it can't get invaded by a population of unconditional cooperators. So what that means is that you have to get something to get cooperation off the ground. That's the question we're trying to answer. We're not trying to answer, given that cooperation is already there, how can we secure it from invaders? So what some researchers like Bill Hamilton and Axelrod have proposed is that kinship might be able to get, rare strategies that are altruistic off the ground. And they act like a ratchet, okay, that ratchets up the percentage of people who are unconditional cooperators past the point where defectors can maintain themselves. But the trouble is, another trouble with reciprocity is that, okay, let's assume that all of us are conditional cooperators, and we have been triumphant in booting out the defectors. Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people in this room. So if we reproduced, there would be a lot of sampling error in the genes, and so what that means is that there would be strong genetic drift or cultural drift. What that means is that cooperators would be able to come in because they have identical payoffs to us. Once cooperators come in, unconditional cooperators, if they reach a certain point, the defectors can invade, and then we're screwed. With kinship and reciprocity, it's hard to get cooperation off the ground in large groups. There's other mechanisms I'm not going to talk about that might be important. What are the prospects for reciprocity research that has to do with remittances? Well, they're pretty slim right now because we lack sufficient time depth and relational information. So how do people remit in response to somebody else's remittance? It is possible for some data sets. In the LSMS, it's possible for like 5. So that's not a lot of statistical power if you're making cross-cultural comparisons. We already don't have much power since we only have 20 countries. But more longitudinal data is coming, and there are probably other sources I haven't considered. What about kinship? What are the remittance prospects here? Well, household surveys do supply genealogical relationship to the household head. Stepson, stepdaughter, daughter, son, grandson, blah, blah, blah. So from that, you can derive relationships between everybody in the household. Okay, you have enough information to do that. But the trouble is, we really only be assessing the effects of kinship on the amount people send. We wouldn't be necessarily studying the emergence of cooperation in remittance networks. Okay? But there's another issue in social evolution that has to do with the question you asked. Or no. It has to do with your prediction that people would cooperate. Well, they would, maybe, or some people would cooperate if we just switch this payoff matrix around. Suddenly it's better to be a sucker than it is to get punished if both people defect. Not get punished, but if everybody's a defector. And what this leads to is a cruel bind. So imagine that, again, Josh and I are driving cross country through the mountains, and we reach a snowdrift. Well, we can't keep driving unless one of us gets out and shovels the snow out of the way. And if neither of us do, we're going to die. And if both of us did, then we would shovel the snow faster, but I certainly would prefer not to shovel snow because it's cold. So what ends up happening is that we get a stable mixture of cooperators and defectors if we have a population doing this over time. Or people who practice a mixed strategy. They cooperate sometimes, they defect some other times. Or if we have like a continuous thing, so it's not just your strategy is cooperate or don't, it's invest this much, right? We'll have people who invest a lot, and some people who invest little, okay? So in this case, everybody's pushing away Piglet because he is sick, and they're sharing the costs of punishment. If people can share the costs of punishment, or they share the benefits in any way of cooperation, then it's a snowdrift game, okay? Or, no, I'm not going to go. And the cruel bind of remittance sharing. That was just a funny picture. Where does the cruel bind or the snowdrift happen in remittance sharing? Well, a simple case, when we're looking at whether people just remit or they don't, occurs if mutually defecting remittance partners do worse than if only one partner remitted. but it's still preferable not to remit. When would this obtain? I suggest it might obtain in places where there's a lot of chain migration that leads to joint economic enterprises that benefit if somebody invests in the startup costs, okay? Or somebody invests in somebody else's education, right? But I would prefer not to invest, right? Okay. What's another way that we can avoid a social dilemma? Well, if we made mutual cooperation better than if I defected and he cooperated, then there's no social dilemma. In fact, there kind of is. One of the Nash equilibria that emerges is that both people defect. The other one, which is better for both of us than if we both defect, is if both of us cooperate. So if we can assure one another that we will cooperate through some kind of social norm, it can be totally arbitrary. Then we'll both cooperate. And so Mike Albard and David Nolan is alumni of this graduate program, have looked at whale hunting on the Lamalera in Indonesia. And they suggest that cooperation works like this. So people get together in these huge groups to hunt whales because they'll all do a lot better if they get together and hunt whale. The returns, at least historically, were much greater than if they got together in smaller groups and fished. Okay? This is also called synergistic mutualism, because by synergy, we produce something that is the best for us. Okay? But only if that synergy obtains. So this might happen if remittance partners do best when they coordinate remittance investments. Okay? They do second best when neither remits. Okay? We can think of a continuous thing, how much do you invest? But this is a simple case. And so if one remits and the other doesn't, then the person who remitted, their investment is wasted. So this might obtain in a variant of the previous case. So if we're getting together in a joint economic enterprise, and there's a threshold amount of investment that must take place beforehand, okay, that if not reached, your remittance is wasted, then we have synergistic mutualism. Does everybody understand that? Okay. And then finally, it's really easy to get cooperation going if it's both better. If it's better to cooperate no matter what your partner does. In that case, I will cooperate no matter what. This is called byproduct mutualism because it's just a byproduct of something else. It happens when sheep get together to herd. For every individual sheep, it's better to be around a bunch of other sheep because it decreases your predation risk. Here's another example of byproduct mutualism when not everybody has the same potential payoffs. So this guy's the spearman of a Lamalera whale hunting crew. This guy's a stud. Right? Yeah, I'd want to have a date with him. And so would most of the other people in the village. So this is a case of byproduct mutualism through costly signal. Okay? That this guy is... Where would byproduct mutualism obtain in the remittance economies that we talked about? Well, some sociologists and economists by the name of Lucas and Stark, in the 80s, they published an article about male migrants who remit to Botswana. And they found that those who remit more are those who can secure land tenure. What is land tenure going to increase? Marriage prospects. What are marriage prospects going to increase? The how. What's the intervening variable between marriage prospects and fitness? Yeah, mating opportunities, right? You can't mate if nobody wants to mate with you. Okay, another way that this might work is if we look at donations from hometown associations as a signal of status. This might not be related to fitness nowadays, but people's behavior, their status striving, has, some argue, been the product of our evolutionary history. Status striving might have, in previous environments, increased your long-term reproductive success. But even if we've answered how we get cooperation off the ground, we haven't answered the question of how the benefits of cooperation are split between different social participants. Okay? So I have a silly story for you.